I'm sorry, I just need to count it again. Her voice barely reached the counter. Her fingers, thin trembling, pushed pennies across the glass one by one, like they were the last thing she owned in the world. Because they were. Nobody looked at her, nobody moved. And then a man who weighed 240 pounds of leather and steel sat down. His coffee walked across that bakery floor and did something nobody in that town expected. He saw her. And what he discovered next would shake that entire community to its foundation. If this story moves you, hit that subscribe button right now and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Stay with me till the very end. You will not regret it. The pennies were the first thing he saw. Not the woman, not her face, not the way her coat hung off her shoulders like it belonged to someone twice her size. Logan Mercer saw the pennies first spread across the bakery counter in a careful, desperate little line, and something in his chest went tight in a way he hadn't felt in a long time. He was standing near the back of Harlow's Bakery, a place he'd been coming to for 11 years, ever since May Harlow started keeping a thermos of the darkest coffee in Clearwater County, specifically because she knew he'd be in before 7. Logan didn't come to Harlow's for the pastries. He came because it was warm, and because May never asked him questions, and because in a town that had complicated feelings about the Hells Angels, this was one of the few places where a man in a cut felt like a man and nothing more. It was 6:43 in the morning. The temperature outside had dropped to 9 degrees overnight, and the wind was the kind that found the gaps in every layer you were wearing. Most of the town was still inside. A few early risers stood in line. Dan Pruitt from the hardware store, the Kellerman twins who ran the feed supply, a nurse from the county clinic still in scrubs from a night shift. Normal Tuesday morning. Nothing unusual, except the woman at the counter. She was small. That was the first thing Logan processed. Not old, not fragile, just small in the way a person becomes small when they've been invisible for a long time. Her hair was white blonde, the color that comes after a lifetime rather than a salon visit, and it was pinned back with the kind of careful neatness that told him she had taken time with herself this morning. That detail stuck with him later. She had brushed her hair. She had pinned it back precisely. She had made herself presentable for this errand, which meant this errand mattered to her enormously, which meant that she had known when she left her house that it was going to be hard. She was counting pennies, not digging through a purse in that ordinary, mildly embarrassed way a person does when they realize they're short a few cents. She was counting from a worn coin purse, placing each penny deliberately, her lips moving in a way that suggested she was doing the arithmetic in her head, and the arithmetic was not coming out the way she needed. The young man behind the counter, Tyler May's nephew, maybe 19 years old, was watching her with the particular expression of someone who doesn't know what to do and has chosen to do nothing. Not unkind, just frozen. He was 19. "Ma'am," Tyler said, "it's $3.49 for the whole grain." "I know," she said. "I know that. She paused. "Count it again." I'm sorry, I just need to count it again. $3.49. Logan watched her push the pennies back together, start over, and his jaw tightened. Because he could see it already. He could see the math. He could count what was in front of her faster than she could, and what was in front of her was not $3.49. Nobody in line moved. Dan Pruitt looked at his phone. The Kellerman twins murmured something to each other. The nurse stared at the pastry display. Not one of them looked at the woman with the pennies the way you don't look directly at certain things, because looking makes it real and real makes it yours. Logan set down his coffee. He moved through the bakery the way large men sometimes do in quiet spaces, which is to say everyone felt him moving before they saw him. He came up alongside the woman close enough to see her face properly for the first time, and what he saw there made something inside him go very, very still. She was not just poor. He had seen poor. He had grown up poor, had spent years of his life around people who had nothing, and he knew what that looked like, the particular combination of resignation and strategic pride that comes from long practice with scarcity. This woman had something different in her face, something more recent and more raw. Her eyes were too bright. The skin around her mouth was drawn in a way he recognized as hunger. Not today's hunger, not yesterday's, the kind of hunger that had been going on for a while. "I've got it," he said quietly. She looked up at him and he watched her face move through 5 different emotions in about 2 seconds. Surprise, pride, humiliation. Gratitude fighting with humiliation. And then underneath all of it, something he wasn't expecting. Relief. Pure, devastating relief. Like a door that had been held shut by sheer force of will had just given way. No, she said immediately. No, thank you. I'm fine. I just need to... Tyler, Logan said without raising his voice. Give her the whole grain and whatever else she came in for. Put it on my tab. Mr. Mercer, Tyler started. Please, the woman said, and her voice cracked on the word. And that was the sound, that single fractured syllable that made Tyler stop arguing and made every person in the line go very still. Please, I don't need charity. I just need a moment. But her hand was shaking when she said it, and then her knees went. It wasn't a fall exactly. It was a slow, terrible yielding, like a building settling under weight it was never designed to carry. Logan caught her before she reached the floor, caught her with both hands, her arm and her elbow holding her up with a steadiness that surprised even him, because she was so light. She was so light it stopped his breath. Easy, he said. Easy, I've got you. I'm fine, she whispered. I just stood up too fast. Okay, he said. Okay, can you walk to that table over there? I'm fine. I know you are. Can you walk to that table? She walked to the table. She sat down with her back straight and her coin purse clasped in both hands, and her chin lifted, and Logan pulled out the chair across from her and sat down like it was the most natural thing in the world, like two strangers sitting down together at 6:45 in the morning in a small Montana bakery was something that happened every Tuesday. I'm Logan, he said. She looked at him, the cut, the patches the size of him, the silver threading through the dark beard, and she held his gaze with a directness that told him she had faced harder things than a biker this morning. Evelyn, she said. Evelyn Parker. Nice to meet you, Evelyn Parker. Tyler appeared at the table with the loaf of whole grain bread and, without being asked, a cup of hot tea and a plate with two of May's cinnamon rolls. He set them down quickly and left without a word. Logan watched Evelyn look at the cinnamon rolls, and he watched her look away from them, and he knew she wanted them the way someone wants something they have decided they are not allowed to want. Go ahead, he said. I didn't ask for those. Tyler brought them. Take it up with Tyler. A pause. Something moved across her face, not quite a smile, but the memory of one. She picked up the tea with both hands and held it, and he could see how much she needed the warmth, how her fingers curved around the mug like it was the first warm thing she'd touched all morning, which he would later learn it was. You don't have to sit with me, she said. I'm sure you have somewhere to be. I've got time, he said. You're one of those... She stopped, started over. You're with the motorcycle club. Hell's Angels, yes, ma'am. She nodded slowly, processing this. My husband used to say... Hey, she stopped again. What did your husband used to say? He said people judge the cover before they read the book. A pause. Gerald was a librarian. He had a saying for everything. Smart man. The smartest I ever knew. Her voice was steady when she said it. The steadiness of someone who has said a thing so many times it has become a shape she can hold without breaking. But her knuckles around the mug had gone white. Logan let the silence sit for a moment. He was good at silence. 11 years running a chapter had taught him that the space between words was usually where the truth lived if you were patient enough to wait for it. Evelyn, he said, when did you last eat a real meal? She didn't answer right away. She looked at the table. She looked at the tea. She looked at something that was not in the bakery at all, something far away and private, and he gave her the time she needed. I had crackers yesterday, she said finally, and tea. A pause. The day before. He kept his face neutral. He was very deliberate about keeping his face neutral. And before that, some crackers. And, she stopped, set down the mug. Mr. Logan. Just Logan. Logan. She met his eyes, and what he saw in them was the hardest kind of dignity, the kind that has been scraped down to its final layer and refuses to surrender even now. I don't want to be a problem for you. You're not a problem for me. I'm managing my situation. Okay, I have a plan. Okay, Evelyn. I'm not... Her voice dropped. I'm not one of those people who I had a life, I had a home. I had a husband who worked for 31 years, and I worked for 24, and we saved, and we planned, and we were careful, and I am not... Her voice broke. Just once. She caught it, pulled it back, straightened her spine, and looked at him with those bright, too bright eyes. I'm not asking for anything. Logan looked at her for a long moment. I know, he said. You came in to buy bread. Something in her face collapsed slightly at that. Not a lot, just enough. The way a fist unclenches after holding on for so long, the hand has forgotten what open feels like. I came in to buy bread, she agreed quietly. Eat the cinnamon roll, Evelyn. She looked at it, and then with the careful deliberateness of someone who has been denying themselves small things for so long that accepting one feels like an act of defiance against themselves. She picked it up and took a bite. Logan looked away, gave her that. At the counter, he could see Dan Pruitt watching, the Kellerman twins watching, the nurse watching, nobody coming forward, nobody saying anything. And he felt something stir in his chest that was not quite anger and not quite grief, something older and slower. The feeling a man gets when he recognizes a failure of community in real time, when he sees the gap between what people should do and what they actually do, and has to decide which side of that gap he's going to stand on. He already knew which side he was standing on. He'd known since the Pennies. Two of his guys were outside, Dex Calloway and Ricky Bones, both of them drinking coffee against the truck because the thermos inside was empty and they weren't going to come in and crowd up a bakery first thing in the morning. Logan caught Dex's eye through the window and gave a slight nod, the kind of nod that in 11 years of riding together had come to mean, pay attention, something's happening, stay close. Dex straightened up immediately, set down his cup, looked at Ricky. Ricky looked back. They stayed where they were, but they were paying attention now. Logan turned back to Evelyn. Tell me about the plan, he said. She looked at him. Excuse me? You said you have a plan for managing your situation. Tell me about it. She studied him for a moment, not suspiciously, but with the careful assessment of a woman who has lived long enough to know that people rarely ask questions without reasons, and that reasons are not always what they appear to be. Why, she said, because I'm sitting here and I've got time and you've been carrying something for a while. I can see it. He paused. You don't have to tell me anything, but if you want to talk, I'm listening. A long silence. The bakery had filled slightly while they talked. May herself had come out from the back, noticed the situation, and had quietly made sure that the table near Logan and Evelyn stayed empty. May was like that. She understood when a conversation needed space. Evelyn set down the remainder of the cinnamon roll. She folded her hands on the table. She looked at them, at her hands, which were weathered and capable and trembling very slightly, and she made a decision. Gerald died 14 months ago, she said. Logan said nothing. He listened. Heart attack. Very fast. He was here one morning and gone by evening, and there was nothing. She paused, gathered herself. The lawyer said the estate was simple. We didn't have much. The house and the savings, and the pension that was supposed to transfer to me. Survivor's benefit. That's what they called it. Gerald paid into it for 30 years. Survivor's benefit. Okay. There was a man, she said, and something shifted in her voice. Something went cooler and harder, the way metal changes under cold. He came to the house about 3 weeks after the funeral. Very polished, very kind. Said he was a financial advisor. Said he helped widows manage transitions. Said there were documents I needed to sign to access the pension transfer accounts, protect assets, all of it. Very official, very... She stopped. I was still in shock. Gerald handled all of it, the finances. I trusted Gerald. I never had to, she breathed. I signed things. Logan's jaw tightened. He kept it still. What did you sign? I don't fully understand what I signed. That's the... Her voice caught something sharp in it now, sharp like broken glass, and he recognized it as the edge of self-blame, the particular cruelty of it. That's the part I cannot forgive myself for. I signed documents a woman with sense would have read first. But Gerald had been dead for 22 days, and this man was sitting at my kitchen table with official papers and a pen, and I signed. What happened after? The accounts froze. 3 weeks later, every account I had access to was frozen because of some legal dispute, they said. Something about the estate, something Gerald had supposedly owed. I tried to contact the pension office, and they said there was a hold. I tried to contact the bank, and they said there was a hold. I tried to contact... She stopped, breathed. I tried to contact the financial advisor and the number was disconnected. The bakery around them continued its quiet morning business, but Logan felt the world narrow down to this table, this woman, this story that was landing in his chest like stones being dropped one by one into still water. How long has this been going on, he asked. Almost 3 months, she said, since October. She looked at him. I had some savings in the house. Cash. Gerald always kept a little. He was careful that way. I've been using that. But it ran out in December, and since then I've been... She smoothed her coat with one hand, a small automatic gesture. I've been managing. Crackers and tea, Logan said. She didn't answer. Evelyn, he leaned forward slightly. Where are you living? My home. My farmhouse. Gerald and I bought it 40 years ago. I've lived there 40 years. Is it? He stopped. It was 9 degrees this morning. A pause. I have the furnace, she said. Is the furnace working? A longer pause. It's running, she said carefully. He looked at her face, at the way she was choosing words, the way a person chooses their footing on uncertain ground, and he felt the weight of what she wasn't saying land harder than anything she had said. Evelyn, he said quietly, is your house warm? She looked at the table for a long moment. The teacup, the coin purse, the pennies she hadn't picked up yet, still sitting where she'd pushed them, a little line of copper on a bakery counter, the first thing he'd seen this morning. I have extra blankets, she said. Logan sat back. He breathed. He looked at the window at Dex and Ricky outside, and then he looked back at the woman across from him, this woman who had brushed her hair and pinned it back precisely and walked through 9-degree weather in a coat that didn't fit her and tried to buy bread with pennies and had said, I'm fine 3 times since he'd sat down. Okay, he said. His voice was even, measured. The voice he used when he had made a decision, and the decision was not going to be argued with. Here's what's going to happen. She looked up. You're going to finish that tea, he said, and then I'm going to drive you home. Absolutely not, she said. Evelyn, you are a stranger. I am, he agreed. I'm also the only person in this building who has been paying attention for the last 20 minutes, so you can take your chance with the stranger, or you can go back to your cold farmhouse alone, and you can think about which of those options Gerald would choose for you. She stared at him. He stared back. And then something happened in her face that he would think about for a very long time afterward. Something he would try to describe to Dex later and fail because it was the kind of thing that doesn't fit in words. Her chin came down just slightly. Her hands, still clasped on the table, loosened, and she let out a breath that seemed to come from somewhere so deep and so tired that it made the air between them change. Gerald would say, don't be stupid, she said quietly. Gerald sounds like a wise man. He'd also want me to point out that there are 2 other men outside who ride motorcycles and are watching this table. Those are my guys, Dex and Ricky. They're good people. How would I know that? You don't, Logan said. You have to decide whether you trust me. Another silence. Longer this time. May refilled the tea without being asked, left again without a word. Evelyn looked at the pennies on the counter. She looked at the cinnamon roll she had half eaten. She looked at Logan Mercer, who was large and bearded and wore a cut with a death's head on it and had the calmest eyes she had seen on anyone in 3 months of absolute terror, and she made the second decision of the morning that would change everything. All right, she said. She picked up her coin purse. She picked up her bread. She put her pennies away one by one, and she let a Hells Angels chapter president take her home. What they found when they got there would change the course of the next 2 months for Evelyn, for Logan, for the chapter, and for the entire town of Clearwater. But that is the part of the story that comes after the pennies. That is the part that comes after a woman with a pinned back hairdo and a worn coin purse was seen, really truly seen, for the first time in 3 months. And it starts, as most things do, with someone deciding to look. What happened when Logan walked through Evelyn's door? That is a story you are not ready for yet. Stay with me. The truck pulled off the main road onto a dirt lane that hadn't been graded since autumn, and Dex, who was driving, said nothing. Ricky, in the back seat beside Evelyn, said nothing either. Logan rode in the passenger seat with his arm resting on the door and his eyes forward, and the only sound was the engine and the wind and Evelyn's quiet directions left at the oak straight past the mailbox. The driveway is just ahead, given in the same careful, measured voice she'd used in the bakery, the voice of a woman who had learned to take up as little space as possible. When Dex stopped the truck, Logan opened his door before the engine cut off. "You don't have to come inside," Evelyn said quickly. "You've done enough. More than enough. I can—" "Evelyn." Logan looked back at her over his shoulder. "I'm coming inside." She opened her mouth, closed it, nodded once the way a person nods when they've run out of the energy to argue and some part of them didn't want to win the argument anyway. She got out of the truck. She walked to her front door. And when she pushed it open and stepped inside, Logan followed her, and the cold that came out of that house hit him in the face like a wall. Not a draft, not a chill, a wall. The kind of cold that has been settling for days, sinking into floors and furniture and fabric. The kind of cold that means a structure has not been properly heated in a very long time. Logan had grown up in Montana. He knew what a cold house felt like. He knew the difference between a house that got cold overnight and a house that had given up on being warm. This house had given up. He didn't say anything. He stepped inside and looked around, and he felt Dex come in behind him and stop. And he heard Ricky's sharp intake of breath quickly controlled, and none of them said a word because sometimes the only right thing to do with a truth that large is let it breathe for a moment before you try to speak around it. Evelyn set her bread on the counter and turned to face them, and he could see it in her face, the excruciating vulnerability of being seen in your own suffering in your own home by people who had been strangers 2 hours ago. "I know," she said quietly. "I know how it looks." "How does it look to you?" Logan asked. She considered the question seriously, the way she seemed to consider everything with a kind of deliberate intelligence that made him understand she had been a capable, organized woman for a very long time, and that capability was still there, still running, just pinned under the weight of everything that had collapsed around her. "It looks like a woman who lost control of her situation," she said, "and who is," a pause, "embarrassed by that." "There's nothing embarrassing about being targeted by a scammer," Logan said. "There is when you're 73 years old and you've been managing your own affairs since you were 19 and you sat at your own kitchen table and signed papers you didn't read." Her voice was flat and precise and contained a self-judgment so sharp it had clearly been worn smooth by repetition. She had said this to herself in her own head many times. "Gerald trusted me to be careful." "Gerald trusted you," Logan said, "which is different." She looked at him. "He trusted you to be a person," Logan said. "Not a lawyer, not a forensic accountant, a person who was grieving and scared and alone and had someone sit down at her table with official papers and a pen." He paused. "That's not a failure of carefulness. That's a predator doing what predators do." Something moved across Evelyn's face, quick and complicated, the look of someone who has heard a thing they desperately needed to hear, but has been arguing against it for so long, they don't know yet whether they're allowed to believe it. She didn't respond to it directly. She was not a woman who let herself be comforted quickly. Logan was beginning to understand that. Instead, she said that the furnace is in the basement. And she said it the way you say something you have been pretending is fine for weeks. Ricky was already moving toward the kitchen, not because he'd been told to, but because Ricky had been riding with Logan for 9 years, and he read rooms the way some men read weather, instinctively accurately ahead of the event. He stopped at the refrigerator. He didn't open it. He just put one hand on the handle and looked at Logan. Logan gave him a look back. "Go ahead." Ricky opened the refrigerator. The silence that followed lasted about 3 seconds, which is a very long time for a silence. There was a partial stick of butter, a carton with maybe 2 inches of grape jelly, 3 eggs, a box of baking soda that had been there so long it had probably stopped absorbing anything. On the shelf in the door, a half-empty container of creamer and a lemon that had gone soft. That was it. That was the entire refrigerator. Ricky closed the door carefully. He turned around. His face was doing something complicated that he was working hard to keep still, and Logan recognized it because he was doing the same thing with his own face. Ricky Bonafide Castellano, who had done 3 years in county for aggravated assault at the age of 22 and had spent the subsequent 15 years becoming someone his mother could be proud of, was standing in a stranger's kitchen, holding himself together by a thread. "Evelyn," Logan said very evenly, "how long has the refrigerator been like that?" "I went to the store 2 weeks ago," she said. "I had a little money left from the—" She stopped. "I bought what I could." "What did you buy 2 weeks ago?" A pause. "Crackers, tea, the creamer, some soup." Another pause. "The soup ran out last week." Dex made a sound, just a small sound, almost nothing, the kind of sound a large man makes when he's pressing something down very hard. He turned away and looked at the window and put one hand on the back of a kitchen chair, and Logan watched his knuckles go white. 9 degrees outside, empty refrigerator, cold house, 73 years old, alone. The legal notices, Logan said, because he needed to keep moving, needed to keep asking questions because questions had purpose, and purpose kept things organized, and organized was how he kept himself from the feeling that was building in his chest like a pressure system. You mentioned paperwork. Can I see it? Evelyn was quiet for a moment. Then she walked to the kitchen table and, with the deliberate movement of someone revealing something they have been hiding, not from others, but from themselves, she moved a dish towel that had been laid across a stack of papers. There was not a stack. There was an accumulation, letters and notices and envelopes. Some opened and flattened, some still sealed, some crumpled and re-smoothed. The whole mass of it organized into rough categories that showed someone had tried to manage it, had tried to keep it orderly, had tried to impose system on chaos because system was what stood between her and the full terror of what the chaos meant. Logan pulled out a chair, sat down, picked up the top letter. It was from the bank, third notice. Language about frozen accounts and pending legal review, and a number to call that Evelyn had circled 3 times in red pen, which meant she had called it. The date on the letter was November. He picked up the next one. Pension office, acknowledging receipt of her inquiry, standard language about review periods and processing times. The date was also November. He looked for a follow-up. Found one. December, same language. Found another. January, same language. They had sent her the same non-answer 4 times in 3 months. Did you call them? He asked. Every time, Every time, she said. I have the notes. She went to a drawer, came back with a small spiral notebook, the kind you buy at a dollar store, and set it in front of him. He opened it. She had documented every call, date, time, name of the representative, if they gave one duration of the call, what they said, what she asked, what the next steps were supposed to be. 11 calls, 11 entries, each one written in her careful, even handwriting, each one ending with some variation of told to wait, will be reviewed, no timeline given, call back in 2 weeks. 11 calls over 3 months. Not one answer that meant anything. Not one person who picked up the phone and said, "This is your money, we are going to fix this." Logan set the notebook down. "Dex," he said without looking up. "Yeah, call Hammer." Dex didn't ask why. He stepped out of the kitchen. Hammer's full name was Dale Hammerschmidt, and he had been a commercial banker for 16 years before a medical discharge from the Army and a divorce, and a choice he'd made in a parking lot in Billings had led him by a strange and non-linear route to a biker bar in Clearwater, where Logan had looked at him across a pool table and seen something useful. Hammer knew banking. More specifically, Hammer knew how banks did what they did when they were hiding what they were doing, because he had done some of it himself and carried that knowledge the way some men carry debt, not comfortably, but usefully. Evelyn was watching Logan's face while he read. "What is it?" she said. "What are you seeing?" "I'm seeing a woman who did everything right," he said, "called every number, wrote down every conversation, filed every inquiry." He looked up and got stonewalled every single time. She sat down across from him, slowly, the way she'd been doing everything. The careful movement of a person who has learned to conserve every bit of energy. "I thought I was doing something wrong," she said. "I thought if I just found the right office, the right person, the right form." "You weren't doing anything wrong." "Then why didn't it work?" It was a genuine question. Not rhetorical, not defeated. A real question from a woman who still believed that systems were supposed to function if you engaged them correctly, who had not yet fully accepted that sometimes systems fail people on purpose. Because the system that was supposed to help you, Logan said carefully, was never triggered. Whatever that man had you sign it created a legal knot that made everyone who could help you legally prohibited from helping you until it got untangled. Evelyn stared at him. "You know about this?" "Hammer does. He'll be here in an hour." "Who is Hammer?" "He used to work in banking. He knows how this works." A pause. "He knows how to unwork it." She was quiet. He could see her processing the combination of something warming in her, some small unlocking, fighting with the 3 months of learned helplessness and fear. She had been alone with this for so long that the presence of people actively trying to help felt almost dangerous, the way your eyes hurt when the lights come on after a long time in the dark. "Evelyn," Ricky said from near the counter. He had been quiet so long they'd both almost forgotten he was there. "Can I ask you something?" She looked at him. "This notebook," Ricky said. He was holding something, not the phone notebook, something else, a smaller one, green-covered. "Is this yours?" Evelyn's face changed, fast and total. The composure cracked across the middle like ice under pressure, and what came through was something raw and white and ashamed. "Where did you find that?" she said. "It was on the counter. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "Put it down." Her voice was sharp and small like a door slamming. "Please." Ricky set it down immediately, stepped back, put his hands up slightly in a gesture of pure, honest apology. Logan looked at the notebook. Green cover, small, the kind that fits in a coat pocket. He looked at Evelyn. "What is it?" he asked. A long silence. "It's my counts," she said. "Your counts." She looked at the table. "I have a medication for my blood pressure. I have to take it every day or—" She stopped. "It's expensive. I couldn't afford enough to take it every day and also eat. So I kept count of which days I took the pill and which days I—" She stopped again. Her hands were flat on the table, pressing down. "I decided I would take it every other day and eat on the days I didn't take it and eat less on the days I did, to make both last longer." Nobody said anything. The kitchen was very cold and very quiet. "Evelyn," Logan said, and his voice came out rough in a way he hadn't intended. "Skipping blood pressure medication is—" "I know what it is," she said, and her voice was back precise and clear. The voice of a woman who will not be told what she already knows. "I know exactly what it is. I'm a grown woman. I've been making hard choices my whole life." She looked up at him. "But I was not going to let them take my home. Gerald and I built our life in this house. I was not going to go to a shelter and lose everything Gerald worked for because of some—" The word she chose was deliberate. "Thief." "So you skipped your medication," Logan said quietly. "And you ate crackers. And you sat in a cold house. And you wrote unanswered letters to every office you could find. And you didn't tell anyone." "Who was I going to tell?" The question landed in the room like something falling. "Who was I going to tell?" she said again. And this time it wasn't sharp. It was genuine and quiet, and it opened a space that showed exactly what the past 3 months had really been. Not just financial collapse, not just hunger, not just cold. The specific, particular agony of going through something terrible alone, because there is no one who is yours anymore. Logan thought about Gerald, about a man who had worked 30 years and kept cash in the house because he was careful, who had a saying for everything, who had trusted his wife to be a person. He thought about 14 months. 14 months since Gerald was there, and then not there, and the world had immediately sent a predator to the door. "You were going to tell us," Logan said. She looked at him. "You just didn't know it yet," he said. Something in her face, the last held thing, the very last, came loose. Not completely, not in a way that produced tears or sound or any external collapse. Just a loosening the way a knot loosens, still present, but no longer pulling. Dex came back in. "Hammer's on his way," said 45 minutes. He looked at Logan. "I also called Ray." Logan raised an eyebrow. Ray Tibbet was their roof guy, had been, since a church fundraiser 3 years ago, where Ray had gotten drunk and tried to start a fight with 3 members of the chapter. And Logan had prevented it from ending badly, and Ray had been grateful ever since, in the particular way of men who know they owe a debt they can't quite name. "I told him we had a situation," Dex said. "He said he's bringing Tom." "Good." "What is happening?" Evelyn said. She looked from Logan to Dex and back. "What are you doing?" "We're going to fix your furnace," Logan said. "You can't just—" "And your roof, Ray knows what he's doing." "I haven't asked you to." "Evelyn." Logan looked at her directly. "I understand you have a fierce and well-earned sense of independence. I respect it completely. I am also going to fix your furnace because it is 9 degrees outside and you have been surviving in a house with no heat, on blood pressure medication. You've been cutting in half, and if you want to argue with me about that, I will sit here and listen to every word of the argument and then go fix your furnace anyway." He paused. "So what would you like to do?" She stared at him. For a long moment she said nothing, and then very quietly, almost too quiet to hear, "Gerald would like you." "I hope so," Logan said. He'd also say, "You're insufferably stubborn." "I get that a lot." Something crossed her face, then unmistakably, undeniably, a ghost of a real smile. Not the memory of one this time. An actual, living, present tense smile, small and fleeting and real. It disappeared almost instantly. But Logan saw it, Ricky saw it, Dex saw it, and in a kitchen that smelled like cold and old paper and 3 months of quiet desperation, that small smile felt like something beginning. Hammer arrived in 42 minutes. He knocked once, walked in when Logan opened the door, and didn't waste time on introductions. He sat at the kitchen table across from Evelyn, pulled the stack of papers toward him, and started reading. Not scanning, reading. The way a person reads when they know what they're looking for and are already angry that they're finding it. 3 minutes in, he stopped, picked up one specific document, read it twice, set it down. "What?" Logan said. Hammer looked at Evelyn. "Mrs. Parker, this document you signed in October, did the man explain what it meant when he gave it to you?" "He said it was a standard estate transfer authorization," Evelyn said, "to move the pension into my name." "It's not that," Hammer said. He said it flat and clean, no softening. "It's a power of attorney document. Broad scope. It authorized someone, whoever that man was working for, to act on your behalf in any financial matter, including instructing the bank to freeze your own accounts pending a dispute that he fabricated." The word landed. Fabricated. Evelyn sat very still. "He made up a legal dispute," Hammer said. "Used your own signature to do it. The bank saw legitimate paperwork with your authorization and followed it. The pension office saw a legal hold and followed protocol. Every door you knocked on was locked from the inside by you. Technically, by your signature on a document he got you to sign 3 weeks after your husband died." The silence in the kitchen was total. Evelyn's face had gone very still, not blank still, the face of a person who has just watched the full shape of something terrible come into focus after 3 months of trying to understand it from the wrong angle. "He used my signature," she said. "Yes." "He used my signature against me." "Yes, ma'am." She looked at her hands on the table, the hands that had signed the papers. She looked at them for a long, long moment. "Can it be undone?" she said. "Power of attorney can be revoked," Hammer said. "If we file a revocation and challenge the fabricated dispute through the right legal channel, yes, we can undo it." He paused. "We need an attorney." "I can't afford—" "I know somebody," Logan said. She looked up. "Legal aid. She does elder financial abuse cases. She's good." He met Evelyn's eyes. "And before you say it, this is what she does. This is what the service exists for. This is not charity, Evelyn. This is a lawyer doing her job for a woman who was robbed." Evelyn held his gaze for a moment. Then she nodded. Once. Solid. "I'm all right," she said. "Then let's start, though." Outside, someone knocked twice on the front door, and then a voice hollered through it. Ray's voice, loud and cheerful in the specific way of men who arrive at problems with tools and feel immediately better. "Logan, you want us to start on the roof or the furnace first?" "Furnace," Logan called back. "On it." Boots on the porch. The front door opened, bringing in a blast of 9-degree air and 2 men with toolboxes. Ricky met them at the door. Evelyn watched all of it with an expression Logan couldn't fully decode, something between disbelief and a careful, fragile wonder, the way you look at something you stopped believing in when it shows up anyway. "This is your whole chapter," she said. "This is Tuesday," Logan said. "Give it a few hours." She looked at him. "What happens in a few hours?" He almost smiled. "The word gets out." She didn't understand what that meant yet. She would. But for now, she sat at her kitchen table across from a former banker who was already making notes on her legal papers, and she listened to men working on her furnace, and she put both hands around the mug of tea that Ricky had quietly made her while nobody was looking. She sat there in her cold house that was about to get warm, and for the first time in 100 and some days, she was not alone with it. The furnace came back to life at 11:47 in the morning. Ray's guy Tom, a thick, quiet man who communicated primarily in grunts and had forgotten more about heating systems than most people ever learn, emerged from the basement with grease on both forearms and said simply, "She'll hold all I got, and that was the entirety of his report. But the sound that followed the deep, settling groan of a system pushing warm air through cold ducts for the first time in weeks was the kind of sound that made everyone in the house go quiet for a moment, out of pure reflex, the way people go quiet when something that was broken starts working again. Evelyn was still at the kitchen table with Hammer. She heard it. She closed her eyes for exactly 3 seconds. Then she opened them and looked back at the paper in front of her and said, "All right, show me that section again." Hammer showed her. Logan watched her from across the room and understood something he hadn't fully articulated yet, that Evelyn Parker's primary love language was competence. That what she needed more than comfort, more than warmth, more than food, was to understand what had been done to her, to name it precisely, to hold it in her hands and see its edges. Because a woman who had spent 40 years managing a household, raising children, working, planning, that woman did not heal by being taken care of. She healed by being put back in possession of the facts. So Hammer showed her the section again, and she read it, and she asked a question that made Hammer sit back slightly, because it was exactly the right question. The kind of question that took him 3 years in banking to learn to ask. If the power of attorney is revoked, she said, what happens to the fabricated dispute? Does it dissolve automatically, or does it have to be separately challenged? Hammer looked at Logan. Logan looked at Hammer. Hammer said, separately challenged, but the revocation weakens it significantly. Once a court sees that the authorization behind the freeze was obtained through misrepresentation. Fraud, Evelyn said. Yes. Call it what it is, she said. It's fraud. Yes, ma'am. Once a court sees the fraud, the dispute collapses, the accounts unfreeze, the pension resumes. He paused. With back payments. She looked at him. Back payments. 3 months of missed pension. It doesn't disappear because they didn't pay it. It accrues. Something moved across Evelyn's face, quick, almost violent in its intensity, a flash of something that was not quite relief and not quite anger, but lived exactly in the space between them. She pressed her lips together, nodded once. Gerald paid into that pension for 30 years, she said. I know. Every month, without fail. He used to joke that the government was going to take it all when he died and leave me with nothing. She paused. He wasn't entirely wrong. He wasn't entirely right either, Hammer said. We're going to get it back. Logan's phone buzzed. He looked at it. Dex had sent a text words out. Who called the reporter? Logan typed back, nobody. Why? Dex, because there's a van from the county news outside. Logan stared at the message for a moment. Then he said without particular inflection, Evelyn. She looked up. There's a news van outside. The change in her face was immediate and absolute. Every degree of openness she'd allowed herself in the past 2 hours closed down at once, the way a house battens down before a storm. Not panic, just pure reflexive self-protection. No, she said. I didn't call them. I don't care who called them. No. Okay. Logan walked to the front door and opened it. A woman was standing on the porch, young, maybe 30, with a recorder in her hand, and the particular expression of someone who has heard just enough of a story to know they want the rest of it. Behind her, a man with a camera was still in the van. I'm looking for Logan Mercer, she said. Found him, Logan said. I'm Dana Reyes, Clearwater County Register. I got a tip that there's something happening out here, something about an elderly woman, and who gave you the tip? She hesitated. I can't say. Logan considered her. He was good at reading people, had been doing it his whole adult life, had learned early that the gap between what a person said and what they meant was usually where the trouble lived. Dana Reyes was not, as far as he could tell, looking for a hit piece. She was looking for a story because she thought it mattered. He respected that, conditionally. You don't go inside, he said. Okay. You don't approach the woman who lives here without her consent. Understood. And if she says no, you pack up your camera and you go write about something else. Dana Reyes held his gaze. Fair enough. Logan went back inside, closed the door behind him, looked at Evelyn. She's not going away, he said. And honestly, I think you should consider talking to her. Evelyn's expression did not warm. Why? Because what happened to you happens to other people. Happens every day to people who don't have a hammer or a ray or a table full of bikers who showed up. He paused. And because the man who did this to you is still out there, and the best way to stop a predator who relies on invisibility is to turn a light on. Silence. Ricky, who had been in the background, being quietly useful all morning, refilling tea, moving papers, not requiring anything from anyone, said without looking up from what he was doing, "My grandmother got scammed, 91 years old, lost her whole savings account. Nobody ever found the guy." He paused. Nobody ever wrote about it either. Evelyn looked at him. Ricky shrugged. Small, honest. Just saying. Evelyn was quiet for a long time. Long enough that Hammer went back to his papers and Ray came through from the basement to say the furnace was stable and would hold through the week, and Logan took a call from back at the chapter, and still she sat there, hands on the table, working through it. Then she said, "I'll talk to her outside." Logan nodded. "And I want to see the recorder. I want to know she's actually a recording and not just pretending to record while someone else films. I'll check it. And I want to talk about what happened to me," Evelyn said. "Not about the men who showed up this morning. This isn't a story about the Hells Angels." Logan almost smiled. "Agreed. This is a story about a woman who was robbed in her own home," she said, "by a man who sat at her kitchen table and waited until she was too tired and too sad to read a document carefully." Her voice had gone flat and clean and hard, the voice of someone who has worked through the shame and come out the other side into something more useful. "That's the story." "That's the story," Logan confirmed. She stood up, smoothed her coat, touched her hair, checking the pin, the same automatic gesture, and walked to the front door. Logan watched her go and felt something in his chest adjust, like a weight shifting to a better position. Whatever Evelyn Parker had been 3 months ago, before the grief and the fraud and the crackers and the cold, she was not gone. She was right there, pressed down, underfed, cold to the bone, and frightened in the deep, private way that doesn't show on the surface, but there. Entirely, stubbornly, formidably there. He gave her 5 minutes alone with Dana Reyes. Then he stayed in the kitchen with Hammer and went back to work. It was Ricky who found it. He had been cleaning up, not because anyone asked him to, just because he was that kind of person, the kind of person who deals with emotion through task. And there was a great deal of emotion in this kitchen and a great deal of task available, and he had been stacking the unopened envelopes into a more organized pile when he found the notebook at the very bottom of the stack. Not the green one, not the phone record one, a different one, larger, cloth-covered, dark blue. He almost set it aside. He would say later that something made him open it, some instinct, some sense that it mattered, the way you know before you look. He opened it to the first page. He read for about 30 seconds. Then he said, "Logan." The word came out different, not loud, not sharp, just different, the specific tone that in 9 years Logan had learned to respond to immediately. He crossed the kitchen in 4 steps, took the notebook, read. It was a letter. In Evelyn's handwriting, the same careful, even hand as the phone records, the same deliberate precision, but different in texture. Not organized, personal, private in the way that things are private when they're written to no one, because there is no one to write to. "It started, Gerald. I don't know how much longer I can do this." Logan stopped, looked at Ricky. Ricky looked at the floor. He kept reading, because he had to. It wasn't one letter, it was many. Different dates starting in November, running through December and January. Letters to a dead man from a woman who had no one else to talk to, written in a small, cloth-covered notebook in a cold house in Montana, while she ate crackers and counted blood pressure pills and called a government number that put her on hold. She wrote about the cold, about waking up in the night and reaching for the warmth that wasn't there anymore, not just in the house, but in the bed. The specific physical grief of a body that had slept beside another body for 41 years. And now had nothing. She wrote about going to the grocery store and buying crackers because they lasted, and not buying the soup she wanted because it was $2 more, and $2 was medication. She wrote about calling the pension office for the 9th time and being told again to wait. She wrote, "I am not afraid of dying, Gerald. I am afraid of losing the house. I am afraid of losing the last place that still has you in it. If I lose the house, I don't know where I put you." Logan closed the notebook. He set it down on the counter. He put both hands flat on the counter and looked at them for a moment. Ricky said nothing. Hammer had gone still. From outside, they could hear Evelyn's voice, measured and clear, telling Dana Reyes what had happened, the financial advisor, the documents, the frozen accounts. Her voice was steady. She was handling it. She was entirely, as she had said, managing her situation. And in her kitchen, the men she had let inside her house stood around a cloth-covered notebook and dealt privately with the knowledge of what managing that situation had actually cost her. Logan picked up his phone, called a number. It rang twice. "Yeah," said the voice on the other end. "Jimmy Reese, chapter member, former journalist, 2 years at the Billings paper before a career change he didn't always talk about." "Jimmy," Logan said, "I need you to do something." "Name it." "I need you to find a man. All I have is a description and a general time frame. He presented himself as a financial advisor targeting recent widows in this county. October time frame, maybe earlier." A pause. "You think he's done this before?" "I don't think," Logan said. "I know. Men like this don't start with one. I'll start pulling records." "Anything else?" "If you find a name," Logan said, "you call me before you call anyone else." "Understood." He hung up, turned back to the room. Dex was standing in the doorway. He'd come in from outside at some point during the notebook, read the room, and positioned himself the way Dex always positioned himself between whatever was happening and whatever might need to be handled. "How bad?" Dex said quietly, meaning the notebook. "Bad enough," Logan said. Dex nodded. Didn't push. The front door opened and Evelyn came back in, bringing cold air with her. She stopped when she saw their faces, saw the notebook on the counter, saw the particular stillness of 4 men trying to look like they hadn't just been hit by something. She looked at the notebook. She looked at Logan. He met her eyes and didn't look away because she deserved that. She deserved someone who could look at the thing she was most ashamed of and not look away. "You read it," she said. "Ricky found it in the stack, I'm sorry." A long silence. She stood very still near the door, her coat still on her hands at her sides. "Those were private," she said. "I know. I wrote those for Gerald. I know. They weren't—" She stopped. Her jaw tightened. "I'm not as fragile as that notebook makes me sound." "I don't think you're fragile at all," Logan said. "I think you're one of the toughest people I've ever met." She looked at him with an expression that suggested she was deciding whether to believe him. "The letters," Logan said. "The ones you wrote to Gerald. You said you were afraid of losing the house because it's where you put him." He paused, chose the next words carefully. "Is there something in this house you want to show me? Something of his—" The question surprised her. He could see it, a small, involuntary opening. Something she hadn't expected. "Why do you ask that?" she said. "Because you've been protecting this house like it's more than a house," he said. "And I want to understand what we're actually protecting." She held his gaze for a moment. Then she turned and walked toward the hallway, stopped at the entrance. "Come with me," she said. "Just you." He followed. She led him to a room at the end of the hallway. Gerald's study, unmistakably still arranged precisely as a man who read and organized and kept records had arranged it. She stopped in the doorway and looked in at it without entering, the way you look at something sacred you're not ready to disturb. On the desk was a photograph. Evelyn and Gerald Young, late 20s, maybe both laughing at something off camera, the kind of unposed candid that only happens when two people are genuinely happy in the moment and not thinking about being photographed. The kind of happy you can't fake. She said, "He would have had all of this sorted out in a week." "Maybe," Logan said, "or maybe the predator would have targeted him the same way." Gerald wouldn't have signed without reading. Gerald wasn't 22 days out from losing his wife. She turned and looked at him. The light in the hallway was thin, and the cold was still present in the walls, retreating slowly as the furnace pushed heat through the house. "You're very determined to take the blame off me," she said. "I'm determined to put the blame where it belongs," he said. "On the man who came to your house and sat at your table and waited for the right moment to use your grief against you." His voice was level. "That's where it goes. That's where it stays." She looked at the photograph for a moment longer. Then she said quietly, "He was a librarian. Did I tell you that?" "You did. He could fix anything in this house. Furnace, roof, plumbing." A pause. "He would have been so angry, so specifically, quietly furious." "Good," Logan said. "Hold on to that. We're going to need it." She looked at him. For what comes next," he said, "because Hammer found something in that paperwork that I haven't told you yet, and it changes things." Her face sharpened immediately, all grief replaced by that same precise attention she'd shown at the kitchen table. "What did he find?" Logan took a breath. "The document you signed it," he said. "The power of attorney. It wasn't the only copy." She stared at him. Hammer found a reference to a secondary filing, same document, different notarization filed under a slightly different version of your name, which means, which means he filed it twice, she said, with two different notaries. Yes. Which means he planned it. Yes. Which means she stopped. Her voice was controlled, but her eyes were doing something he hadn't seen from her before, the specific electrical fury of someone who has just understood the full architecture of how they were betrayed. Which means I was chosen. Deliberately. He found me specifically. We think so, Logan said. Jimmy is pulling records. We think you are not the first. The hallway was very quiet. Outside, he could hear Dex on the phone raise guys moving equipment, the distant sound of the news van idling. Evelyn Parker stood in the hallway of the house she had lived in for 40 years, and she looked at the photograph of herself, laughing at something she couldn't remember anymore. And she did not cry. She did something harder than crying. She stood up straighter. Find him, she said. Her voice was quiet and absolute, not a request, not an appeal, a declaration. Find him, she said again. And whatever you needed from me, documents, testimony, whatever you have it. Okay, Logan said. And Logan. She turned to look at him directly, and her eyes were clear and hard and burning with something he recognized, because he had felt it himself, the specific clarifying anger of a person who has stopped being afraid and started being dangerous. When you find him, whatever you do next. She paused. Make sure he cannot do this to anyone else. Logan held her gaze. You have my word, he said. She nodded, turned back toward the kitchen, back toward Hammer and the papers and the work to be done, and Logan followed her, and when they came back into the kitchen, Ricky looked up and Dex came in from outside, and Hammer set down his pen, and without anyone saying a word, something in the room reorganized itself. Because the woman at the center of it had reorganized herself. She sat down at the table, picked up a pen, looked at Hammer. Where were we, she said. Hammer found his place, the secondary filing. Walk me through it, she said. Everything. And she leaned forward over the papers, and she began to fight. Dana Reyes filed her story at 4:17 that afternoon. She had not planned to file it same day. She had driven out to Evelyn's farmhouse, expecting a feature, the kind of soft human interest piece that ran on page 3 and got shared twice on Facebook by people who meant well. What she got instead was something she had not encountered in 6 years of county journalism, something that had made her sit in her van in Evelyn's driveway for 20 minutes after the interview, staring at her recorder, before she called her editor and said, clear the front page. Her editor, Bill Macy, said, Dana, it's Tuesday. Clear the front page, Bill. A pause. How bad? It's not bad, she said. It's Bill. This woman has been alone in a cold house eating crackers for 3 weeks, and nobody knew. Nobody looked. And the reason nobody knew is because she was too ashamed to say anything, and everyone around her was too busy to notice. Her voice had gone tight in the way it did when she was angry and trying to be professional about it. That's the story. That's the whole story. Clear the page. Bill cleared the page. By 6 o'clock, the story was online. By 7, it had been shared 400 times. By 9, the Clearwater County Register's website, which on a normal Tuesday pulled maybe 200 unique visitors, had crashed twice from traffic. Logan was still at Evelyn's house when his phone started going off. Not calls, texts, one after another from people he knew. People he half knew, people he hadn't spoken to in years. He read them standing in Evelyn's kitchen while Hammer packed up his paperwork and Ray's guys loaded their tools back into the truck. And the messages were all variations of the same thing. I saw the story. What does she need? Tell me what to do. He showed Evelyn. She read 3 of them and handed the phone back without a word. She walked to the window, stood there with her back to him for a moment. Evelyn, he said. I'm fine, she said. Her voice was slightly less steady than usual. Okay. She stopped. I didn't think anyone would. Another stop. She turned around and her face was doing that thing again. The controlled collapse, the emotion pressing against the composure from the inside. I've lived in this town for 40 years, she said. I know these people. I see them at the grocery store. I waved to them from the driveway. She paused. I was starving for 3 weeks and not one of them knew. They know now, Logan said, because a reporter wrote about it. Because you talked to a reporter, he said, because you decided to be seen. That was your choice, Evelyn. You made it. Everything that comes next is because you made it. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned back to the window. What comes next, she said. He looked at his phone. Another 12 messages in the last 2 minutes. May Harlow from the bakery, she wanted to set up a food drop. The Kellerman twins, they had a truck and time, and asked where to start. The nurse from the morning, her name was Carol Bates, and she wanted to know if Evelyn had a doctor she was seeing regularly, and if not, she wanted to help with that. Dan Pruitt from the hardware store brief, direct Dan's entire personality in 6 words. What do you need fixed first? Clearwater, Logan said. That's what comes next. He called a chapter meeting for 7 the next morning. Not at the clubhouse at May's bakery, because May had offered the space, and because the bakery was neutral ground, a place where Clearwater people came, rather than a place they drove past and looked away from. 12 members showed up before 7, which was notable, given that 7 in the morning existed as far as some of them were concerned only in theory. Dex brought coffee, Hammer brought his notes. Ricky brought a list he had started making the day before quietly in the background, the way Ricky did everything. Logan stood at the front of the room and laid it out clean. Evelyn's situation had 3 layers. Legal, the fraud, the frozen accounts, the fabricated dispute. That was Hammer's domain, and the attorney's a woman named Sarah Brightwell, who Logan had called at 8 the previous evening, and who had said before he finished explaining, I know this pattern, I've seen it before. Tell her I'll be there Wednesday morning. Physical, the house, the roof, the furnace, which was holding, but barely the general state of a structure that had been deferred on for months because there was no money and no one to help. An immediate food, medication, basic stability, the things that had to be in place right now, while the legal process did what legal processes did, which was take longer than anyone wanted. He didn't ask for volunteers, he assigned. Dex took the house. He pulled up the contacts on his phone, contractors, electricians, suppliers, and started making calls before Logan finished talking. Ray was already committed. Tom was already committed. 2 other guys from the chapter had trade skills and said so. Ricky took food. He had already characteristically thought about this in advance and had a plan, not a charity drive, not a handout, but a coordinated rotation. May was in. The grocery on 4th was in. 3 families from the east side of town who had called Logan the previous night were in. It would run as a delivery schedule twice a week until Evelyn's finances were restored. Clean, sustainable, nothing that required Evelyn to ask or perform gratitude on a schedule. Jimmy Reese gave his update on the man. He had worked through the night. Logan recognized the specific look of someone who had not slept, but had found something, the particular brightness of a person running on discovery rather than rest. He had pulled county records, cross-referenced estate filings, and identified 3 other cases that matched the pattern. 3 other women, all widows, all in the county, all targeted within 6 months of their husbands' deaths. One had lost everything and moved away. One had managed to get half her money back through a different attorney. One, a woman named Ruth Casper, 81 years old, living outside Billings, had never recovered anything and had not spoken publicly about it. Same document structure. Same time frame, same window of vulnerability. Different name each time, but Hammer looked at the notarization patterns and said with the flat certainty of someone who had spent 16 years watching financial paper trails, same man, different name, same hands. How close are we to a name, Logan asked. Closer than yesterday, Jimmy said. I need 2 more days. You have one. Jimmy nodded. He had expected that. Sarah Brightwell arrived at Evelyn's farmhouse Wednesday morning at 9 sharp. She was 52, compact, with the kind of efficient energy that made a room reorganize itself around her presence without her saying a word. She shook Evelyn's hand, sat down at the kitchen table, opened her briefcase and said, walk me through everything. Don't leave anything out because you think it makes you look bad. Nothing you tell me will change my opinion of you, but everything you tell me may change this case. Evelyn walked her through everything. Logan sat in the corner. Not participating, Evelyn didn't need him to speak for her, but present. He had learned by now that this was what Evelyn needed from him, not advocacy, but witness. Someone in the room who already knew the whole shape of the thing and didn't flinch at any part of it. Sarah listened. She took notes. She asked 4 questions, each one surgical. When Evelyn finished, Sarah sat quietly for a moment, then looked at Hammer, who was across the table. The secondary filing, she said. You have a copy. Right here. He slid it across. She read it. Her expression didn't change, but something in her posture did. A slight forward lean, a tightening of focus, the body language of a person who has just confirmed what they suspected and is now making calculations. "This is sloppy," she said. "Excuse me," Evelyn said. "The secondary filing. It's sloppy. He used a slightly different version of your name to try to spread the paper trail across two different county systems, which is sophisticated, but the notarization date is 48 hours before the first filing, which means he filed out of order and left a timestamp contradiction." She tapped the paper. "This is what wins the case. This right here." Hammer made a sound that was almost a laugh. "I saw the contradiction. I didn't see that it meant anything." "It means he was in a hurry," Sarah said, "which means he had a reason to hurry, which means—" She stopped, looked at Logan. "Who else is looking at this?" "My guy Jimmy. He's pulling records on previous cases." "How many has he found?" "3 confirmed so far." Sarah nodded slowly. "There may be more. This level of sophistication, this pattern, this person has been doing this for a while. The sloppiness on the secondary filing suggests he was moving faster than usual, possibly because he had another target lined up." She paused. "We need to move fast. If he knows the Parker case has been flagged." "He'll run," Logan said. "Or he'll accelerate the next one," Sarah said. "Which is worse." The kitchen went quiet. Evelyn had been listening to all of this with her hands flat on the table and her face still. Now she said, "Is there another woman right now? Is there someone else he's doing this to?" "We don't know," Sarah said. "Find out," Evelyn said. Her voice had the quality it had in the hallway outside Gerald's study, quiet and absolute. "Before you do anything else, before you file anything, find out if there's someone else, and if there is, you stop him from getting to her first." Sarah looked at her with something that was not quite surprise, but was its neighbor. "Mrs. Parker, I've had 3 months," Evelyn even said. 3 months of it. I don't want anyone else to have 3 months of it." She met Sarah's eyes. "Is that clear?" "Perfectly clear," Sarah said, and she pulled out her phone. Jimmy called at 2 in the afternoon. Logan was outside with Dex reviewing the list of repairs needed on the farmhouse's exterior when the call came in. He answered on the second ring. "I have a name," Jimmy said. Logan walked away from Dex. "Talk." "Martin Coles, 58 years old, originally from Spokane. He has 3 aliases: David Marsh, Robert Fenn, Martin Cole without the S. He has a record." A pause, and Logan recognized in that pause the specific weight of information that is worse than expected. 2 prior fraud convictions, one in Washington State 2019, one in Idaho 2021, both targeting widows. Both times he served light sentences, less than 18 months, because the women were reluctant to testify and the paper trail was complex. And now he's here. "He's been operating in this county for at least 14 months, Jimmy said. "I found 5 cases, Logan, not 3. 5. Evelyn is the most recent." Another pause. "And I think there's a 6th. Logan stopped walking. "Who?" "Woman named Helen Marsh. No relation to the alias, just a coincidence of name. 80 years old, lives near the county line. Her daughter posted in a local Facebook group 2 days ago saying her mother had been contacted by a financial advisor she didn't recognize and had signed some papers and now couldn't access her savings account." Jimmy's voice was flat and controlled. "The post was from this morning. The daughter is trying to figure out who to call." "Call her," Logan said. "Right now, get me the daughter's number." "Already pulled it." Logan went back inside. He found Sarah at the kitchen table, still on the phone. He held up a hand. She paused her call. He said, "We have a 6th victim, current, Helen Marsh near the county line. He may have just moved on her." Sarah was on her feet before he finished the sentence. She ended her call and made a new one. Logan handed her Jimmy's notes. Evelyn was in the next room. She came to the doorway when she heard Logan's voice shift. She read the room. "It's happening," she said, "and there's someone else." "We think so," Logan said. "We're moving on it." She nodded once. She picked up her coat. "Evelyn," Logan said, "you don't have to." "That woman is 80 years old," Evelyn said. "She's afraid, and she doesn't know what's happening to her, and she's probably not telling anyone because she's ashamed." She met his eyes. "I'm going with you." There was exactly no argument he could make against that, so he didn't try. They drove to Helen Marsh's house in 2 vehicles. Logan and Evelyn in the truck, Era on her phone in the back seat, directing the approach decks following with Jimmy. The daughter, a woman named Patricia, mid-50s voice, strung tight with the specific panic of someone who understands something is wrong, but not yet how wrong met them at the door. She took one look at the group on her mother's porch and said, "Who are all of you? My name is Sarah Brightwell. I'm an attorney. This is Logan Mercer, and this," she indicated Evelyn, "is someone who has been through exactly what your mother is going through. Can we come in?" Patricia looked at Evelyn. Something passed between them in that look. The recognition of shared experience, the specific communication of women who know what it means to be scared in a house that used to feel safe. "Come in," Patricia said. Helen Marsh was in her living room, small and upright in her chair with the familiar expression. Logan had come to know the dignity of a woman holding herself together by the skin of her teeth and refusing to let it show. She looked up when they came in, and her eyes went first to Sarah, then to Logan, then to Evelyn. She stayed on Evelyn. Evelyn crossed the room and sat in the chair closest to Helen, not too close, the right distance, close enough to be present, far enough to give her room. "My name is Evelyn Parker," she said. "A man came to my house in October. He said he was a financial advisor. He was very kind and very official, and he waited until I was too sad to think clearly, and then he had me sign papers I didn't read." Helen looked at her hands. "I signed papers," she said quietly. "I know," Evelyn said. "I know you did. That's why I'm here." Helen looked up. Her eyes were bright with the effort of not giving in to what she was feeling. "I thought I was being careful," she said. "I thought I was doing the right thing." "So did I," Evelyn said. You were. You were trying to protect your husband's legacy in your home and your life. That's not foolishness. That's love." Helen Marsh's composure broke. Not entirely, these were women of a certain generation and a certain kind of strength, but it bent. A sound escaped her that was small and private and honest. Patricia came immediately and put her hand on her mother's shoulder, and Helen covered her daughter's hand with her own. Evelyn said, "We found the man. We know who he is. We have an attorney who has stopped him before and is going to stop him for good this time." She paused. "But we need you. We need your testimony. We need you to say what happened to you so that what he did to us becomes a case that sticks." Helen looked at her. "You testified." "I'm going to," Evelyn said. "It took me 3 months to say anything to anyone. I'm saying it now because I don't want it to take you 3 months." A long silence. Patricia's hand tightened on her mother's shoulder. Then Helen straightened, squared herself, put both feet flat on the floor. "What do you need from me?" she said. Sarah opened her briefcase. The case against Martin Coles filed on a Thursday morning, 12 days after Logan Mercer noticed a woman counting pennies at a bakery counter. It filed with the testimony of 6 women: Evelyn Parker, Helen Marsh, and 4 others that Jimmy's reporting and Sarah's network had located and brought in. It filed with a paper trail that Hammer had spent 12 consecutive days building, cross-referencing and annotating in a binder so thorough that the county prosecutor's office called Sarah after receiving it and said simply, "This is extraordinary work." Martin Coles was identified in Billings on a Friday. He was attempting to open a new consulting business under the name David Fenn, a combination of 2 previous aliases suggesting, as Jimmy put it, either creative bankruptcy or profound arrogance. He was taken into custody without incident. Logan got the call at 6:45 in the morning. He was at May's Bakery. He stood at the counter with his coffee and listened to Sarah's voice say the words, and when she finished, he said, "Thank you," and hung up, and May, who had been watching him across the counter the whole time, raised her eyebrows. "They got him," he said. May closed her eyes for a moment, then she opened them and said, "Coffee's on the house today," and went back to work. Logan called Evelyn. The phone rang 4 times before she picked up, and when she said hello, her voice had the slight blurriness of someone woken from sleep, which meant she had been sleeping, which meant she had slept, which in 12 days had not been guaranteed. "They have him," Logan said. Silence on the line. Several seconds of it. Then, "All 6 of us? All 6 of you?" Another silence. He heard her breathe. Heard her set something down, a glass, a cup, something. Heard her cross a floor. "Gerald," she said softly, and he understood she was not talking to him. He let her have the moment. He stood at May's bakery counter with his coffee and let Evelyn Parker stand in whatever room she was standing in and say whatever she needed to say to the man she had written letters to in a cold house for 3 months. Then she came back. Her voice was clear. What happens next? The legal process, he said. Sarah will walk you through it. And the accounts, the pension. Sarah filed the revocation yesterday. It'll take 2 to 3 weeks for the freeze to lift. The back payments. I know, it takes time. A pause. I have food now and heat. Another pause. I can wait. He almost smiled. Yes, you can. Silence again, but different this time. Easier. The kind of silence between people who have been through something together and don't need to fill the air to stay connected. Logan, she said. Yeah. That morning in the bakery. She paused and he could hear her choosing the words carefully the way she did everything. When you sat down across from me, I was going to say no. I had already decided. I was going to count those pennies and buy that bread and go home, and she stopped. I had already decided to go home alone. He said nothing. He let her finish. I don't know why I didn't, she said. I don't know what changed. A long beat. Maybe I was just tired of being invisible. Logan looked at May's bakery counter. At the spot near the register where a woman had spread pennies on the glass 12 days ago, while everyone in the building looked away. You were never invisible, Evelyn, he said. Somebody just needed to look. She was quiet for a moment. Then, Gerald would say that's the kind of thing that sounds simple until you understand how hard it actually is. Gerald sounds like he was right about most things. He was right about enough, she said. And this time when the smile came into her voice, it was full and present and real. The weeks that followed Martin Coles' arrest moved the way recovery always moves, not in a straight line, not in a clean arc, but in the jagged, uneven rhythm of real life, reassembling itself after a long fracture. Some days were good. Some days were harder than Evelyn expected, because it turned out that being rescued did not automatically undo 3 months of survival mode, and her body and her mind had things to say about that on their own schedule. The first night after Logan called with the news, she didn't sleep. Not because she was afraid the fear had changed shape, had become something smaller and more manageable, now that it had a name attached to it, now that Martin Coles was in custody, and Sarah Brightwell was filing documents with the precise, relentless efficiency of a woman who had been waiting for a case this clean. She didn't sleep because the house was warm, because the refrigerator had food in it, because Ricky's rotation had delivered groceries 2 days before, and the kitchen smelled like something that had been cooked in it, and she had made herself soup. Real soup, not the canned kind, and sat at the table she had shared with Gerald for 40 years, and eaten it slowly while the furnace ran, and the wind hit the walls and did not get through. She didn't sleep because she kept noticing that she was safe, and noticing it again and again. The way you notice something that has been missing so long that its return feels too fragile to trust. She called Patricia Marsh the next morning. Helen's daughter answered on the first ring. How is she? Evelyn asked. Better, Patricia said. Scared still, but better. A pause. She asked about you last night. She wanted to know if you were okay. Evelyn felt something move in her chest. Tell her I'm okay, she said. Tell her to call me if she needs to talk. She will. Patricia started again. Mrs. Parker, what you did, coming to the house, sitting with her, I don't know if you understand what that meant. I do, Evelyn said, because someone did it for me first. She thought about that after she hung up, about the chain of it, Logan seeing her and then her seeing Helen and Helen now steadier because of it. The way one act of attention propagated forward into people you would never meet and situations you would never know about. Gerald would have had a saying for it. She could almost hear him reaching for that slight pause he had before a thought he was proud of. She was smiling when she thought it. That was new. That was something. Sarah called on a Tuesday, 17 days after the arrest. The call came at 8 in the morning while Evelyn was having her first full cup of real coffee, not rationed, not the last of a can being stretched, just coffee, and she answered it, knowing from the quality of Sarah's opening breath that it was good news. The freeze lifted this morning, Sarah said. Evelyn set down the cup. Both accounts, the primary and the secondary, full balance restored. A pause. And the pension office called me 20 minutes ago. They've processed the back payments. 3 months of missed benefit deposited as of this morning. Another pause, and this one had something in it that Sarah Brightwell, who was a professional and had done this for 20 years, could not entirely smooth out. Evelyn, with the back payments in the restored accounts, you are whole. Financially, you are whole. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside the window, February had softened, slightly still cold, still Montana, but the brutal edge of January had worn off, and there was a quality to the morning light that suggested the world was considering tentatively the possibility of spring. Say that again, Evelyn said. You're whole, Sarah said. Evelyn put her hand flat on the kitchen table. Gerald's table, the table where she had spread legal notices like a second tablecloth for 3 months, where she had written in the green notebook, in the blue notebook, where she had counted pills and crackers and days. Gerald, she said softly, not to Sarah, to the room. Sarah gave her the moment. Then Evelyn picked up the cup, took a sip, set it down. What about the other women, she said. Helen, the others. All 6 cases are moving. Helen's freeze lifted last week. The others are on 2 to 3 week timelines depending on complexity. A pause. The criminal case is stronger because of the numbers. 6 complainants, a documented pattern, the timestamp contradiction. Hammer found Martin Coles' attorney has already approached the prosecutor about a plea. A plea, Evelyn said. What does that mean for the sentence? It means he doesn't get to litigate and drag you all through testimony, Sarah said carefully. It may mean a shorter sentence than trial could produce, but it means certainty. It means he cannot walk on a technicality. Evelyn was quiet. What's your instinct? Sarah asked. My instinct, Evelyn said slowly, is that I want him in a room in front of a judge. I want him to have to hear what he did, said out loud, by the people he did it to. A pause. But my instinct is also that I am one of 6, and if the other 5 women want certainty over the performance of justice, she stopped. Then I'll support whatever they decide. That's what I'll tell the group, Sarah said. We'll talk Thursday. After the call, Evelyn sat for a while without moving. Then she did something she had not done in months. She went to Gerald's study. She went inside, not just to the doorway inside, and she sat in his chair. She picked up the photograph from the desk. The 2 of them young, laughing, not thinking about being photographed. She looked at it for a long time. We're okay, she told him. It took a minute, but we're okay. She put the photograph down. She straightened her spine. She had things to do. Logan heard about the accounts from Hammer before Evelyn called him because Hammer had a contact at the bank, and the contact had texted him before Sarah finished her own call. He was at the chapter house when the message came in, and he read it standing next to the coffee machine and didn't say anything for a moment. Dex noticed. Good or bad? Her accounts unfroze, Logan said. Money's back. Dex made a sound, not quite a word, just the sound a person makes when something they've been hoping for lands. He picked up his coffee. She call you yet? Not yet. She will. She called 40 minutes later. Logan was outside by then, leaning against the truck in the cold because sometimes a man needed air, and he answered on the second ring. Sarah called, Evelyn said. I heard, he said. Hammer. Of course, a beat. Logan, I want to do something. He waited. The jar, she said. The pennies. I want to put them somewhere. He understood immediately what she meant, and he felt something move through him, that settling sensation again, the weight finding the right position. Where, he said. The bakery, she said. May's counter. I want to put the coin purse on May's counter, and I want it to stay there, and I want people to add to it. She paused. There are other women like me. In this county, in this town, women who are cold and alone and hungry and too ashamed to say anything. I want the jar to be there when they finally say something. I want there to be something waiting for them. Logan was quiet for a moment. Have you talked to May? He said. Not yet. I wanted to tell you first. He didn't ask why. He understood why. Okay, he said. Let's go talk to May. May Harlow cried. She was not a woman who cried easily. She had run a bakery alone for 11 years after her husband left and had learned to be practical about emotion, the way you learn to be practical about anything that could stop you from functioning. But she cried when Evelyn came in and set the worn coin purse on the counter and explained what she wanted to do with it. She cried quickly and efficiently, dried her eyes on her apron and said, I'll make a sign. Give me an hour. You don't need a sign, Evelyn said. I'm making a sign, May said with the absolute certainty of a woman in her own kitchen. People need to know what they're putting their money toward. They need to know her name. Evelyn opened her mouth, closed it, looked at Logan, who was standing by the door with his hands in his pockets, and the particular expression of a man who had learned not to argue with May Harlow. "All right," Evelyn said, "make the sign." The sign went up on a Thursday morning. It was hand-lettered. May had calligraphy skills she deployed rarely and effectively, and it said simply, "Evelyn's Pennies, emergency fund for seniors in need, food, medicine, heating. If you can give, give. If you need, take. No questions asked." Below it, May had placed a large glass jar. The coin purse sat beside it, displayed rather than stored, worn and real and unmistakable. By the time the bakery closed that Thursday evening, the jar had $43 in it. Logan came in Friday morning and added 100 without saying anything about it to anyone. Dex did the same. By Friday afternoon, the chapter had collectively put in $600 again, without announcement, because that was how they did things, without needing the credit, without requiring the visibility. Ricky put in his contribution and then sat at the counter for 20 minutes over coffee and told May about his grandmother again, the one in Billings, the one nobody had written about. May listened to every word. Dana Reyes came on Saturday and wrote a follow-up piece. This one she had built differently from the first, not just Evelyn's story, but the fund, the pattern, the 6 women, the arrest, the thing the community had built in 18 days around a woman who had been invisible for 3 months. She called it What the Pennies Started. It ran Sunday morning. By Sunday evening, the jar had over $2,000. By the following Friday, the jar had to be replaced with a larger one, and then by the end of the month with an actual collection box that a woodworker in town built and brought in without being asked, cedar, with Evelyn's pennies carved into the top by hand. Evelyn saw the box for the first time on a Wednesday in early March, when she came into the bakery for the first time since the morning she had nearly collapsed at the counter. She stood in front of it for a longer moment. She put her hand on the carved letters. She did not cry. She breathed. May came around the counter, stood beside her, and didn't say anything. "He made this," Evelyn said. "Carl Winters, from out on the highway. He said he saw Dana's piece, and he had the wood and the time, and he wanted to do something that lasted." Evelyn kept her hand on the letters. "It's good work," she said. "It is," May agreed, a beat. "May where?" Evelyn said. "That morning, when I came in, you refilled my tea without being asked." May shrugged. "I saw you needed it." "Everyone else in this room looked away," Evelyn said. "Not accusatory, just factual. You refilled the tea." May was quiet for a moment. "I almost looked away too," she said. "I'm not going to pretend I didn't hesitate." A beat. "I'm glad I didn't." "So am I," Evelyn said. The dedication ceremony happened on a Saturday in late March, organized almost entirely by Dana Reyes and Patricia Marsh, both of whom had the shared quality of women who see a thing that should exist and build it without waiting for permission. The bakery was full standing room, people in the doorway, people on the sidewalk outside the window. Evelyn had not expected that. She had expected May and a few of the chapter members, and maybe Carol the nurse and Dan Pruitt. She had not expected Clearwater. But Clearwater came. Dan Pruitt from the hardware store, the Kellerman twins, Carol Bates out of Scrubs and into regular clothes, standing near the back with a quiet smile. Jimmy Reese, who had not slept for 3 days in a row and looked proud in the uncomfortable way of journalists who got something right. Hammer near the door, because Hammer was always near a door. Ray and Tom, who had fixed the furnace in the roof and had come today with the easy presence of men who felt they belonged because they did. Helen Marsh and Patricia, who had driven an hour from the county line and who stood together near the window. Helen small and upright and familiar to Evelyn now in the specific way of people who have survived the same thing. Sarah Brightwell was there. She had driven 2 hours and stood at the side of the room in a coat that was too nice for a bakery and looked entirely unbothered by that. The chapter was there, all of them lined up along the back wall, in their cuts, taking up space in the way large men do, but quietly, respectfully, their presence, a statement without being a performance. Logan stood at the end of the line near the wall where he could see the whole room. May called for quiet. Evelyn stood up. She had not prepared a speech. She had tried twice at Gerald's desk and had thrown both attempts away because they were too formal for the thing she was actually trying to say. She stood at the front of the room and looked at the people who had come, and she started with the truth. "I was invisible," she said. "For 3 months in this town among people I know I was invisible. Not because you're bad people, not because you didn't care, because I made myself invisible. She paused. I was ashamed. I thought that what happened to me, being tricked, being robbed, being hungry in my own house, was something wrong with me. A failure. Something a smarter woman, a more careful woman would have avoided. The room was very still. I was wrong, she said. What happened to me was a crime, committed by a man who chose me because I was grieving and alone, and because he knew that people like me don't ask for help. She looked at the cedar box on May's counter. I want this fund to be the reason the next woman doesn't wait 3 months. I want it to be the thing that's already there when someone finally says out loud, I need help. I don't want them to have to count pennies on a cold morning and hope someone is paying attention. She stopped, looked at Logan because she had said what she'd planned to say, and now she wanted to say the other thing, the harder thing, the thing she'd been working up to. There was a man in this room that morning, she said, 3 months ago. He was standing near the back with his coffee, and he put it down, and he came across the room, and he sat down across from me, and he said his name was Logan. She paused. He didn't fix everything that morning. He didn't make it simple or painless or quick, but he looked. Her voice was steady and clear. He just looked, and that was the thing that started all of this. Applause, real applause, full and warm, filling the bakery from wall to window. Logan looked at his boots. Dex beside him said something under his breath that nobody else could hear. Logan's jaw moved. He looked up. Evelyn was looking at him across the room, the same way she had looked at him across the bakery table on that first morning, directly without flinching, with the full weight of someone who has decided to trust a thing and is not going to apologize for it. He gave her a nod. She gave him one back. May presented the cedar box formally in the way of someone who understands ceremony without being heavy about it. Patricia said a few words about Helen and about what this fund could mean for women who didn't yet know they needed it. Sarah said something brief and precise about the legal protections that now existed for elder financial abuse victims in the county, new protections built partly from the architecture of these 6 cases. Dana Reyes did not speak. She was in the corner taking notes because the story wasn't over yet, because stories like this never fully end, because what you write about matters, and she had learned that this year. After the ceremony, after the crowd began to ease, and the room became itself again warm and coffee-scented, and filled with the smaller conversations that follow large moments, Logan found himself standing beside the cedar box. He looked at the carved letters. He looked at the coin purse beside it, Evelyn's original coin purse displayed like the artifact it was. Evelyn appeared beside him. They stood there for a moment looking at it together. You thought those pennies showed how little you had left, he said. She looked at him. He had said it quietly, not for the room, just for her. Turns out, he said, they showed how much this town still had to learn. She was quiet for a moment. Then Gerald would say, you've been holding on to that line. Maybe a little, he admitted. She looked back at the box, at the room full of people who had come because a story had moved them, and a story had moved them because a woman had finally been seen, and a woman had been seen because a man had put down his coffee and walked across a room. The whole long chain of it running back to that Tuesday morning in February and a line of pennies on a bakery counter. Logan, she said. Yeah, thank you. She said it simply, without the qualifications she might have added 3 months ago. The I don't want to be a burden, and the I don't need charity, and the I'm managing my situation. Just thank you, clean and direct and real. Thank you, he said it doing. And he meant it the way you mean something when you've been changed by it, not just for the acknowledgement, but for the lesson, for the reminder that attention is an act, that seeing someone is a choice, that the space between looking away and looking closer is where communities either hold together or come apart. Evelyn nodded once. She turned and walked back into the room, back toward Helen and Patricia, back toward May and Carol and the people of Clearwater who had come today because they were trying to be better than they had been on that Tuesday morning in February, and that trying was its own kind of beginning. The jar filled. Week after week it filled. It funded a grocery delivery for a man named Walter, 84 years old, who had been skipping meals 3 days a week and telling his daughter everything was fine. It paid for a month of heating oil for a couple out on the East Road who were both on fixed incomes and had been sleeping in their kitchen because it was the warmest room. It bought medication for a woman named June who had been cutting her thyroid pills in half for 6 months and hadn't told her doctor. Each time the fund was used, May put a small mark on a card behind the counter. Not names, just marks. By summer, there were 11 marks. By the following February, there were 30. Evelyn came into the bakery every Thursday morning. She had coffee, not tea. She had gone back to coffee once the rationing stopped, a small reclamation of ordinary pleasure that she did not take for granted. She sat at the same table where she had sat with Logan on that first morning, and she talked to May. And sometimes she talked to people who came in and looked the way she had looked, the careful, contained, too bright-eyed look of someone managing a situation alone. When she saw that look, she sat down. She said her name. She said, "Something happened to me once, and someone sat down across from me and listened, and I want to tell you about it." And every time she did, something began. Because that is the nature of attention. It does not stay where it lands. It moves forward into the people who receive it, and they carry it forward into others. And what starts as one man putting down his coffee and crossing a room becomes over time a town that knows how to look, a town that has practiced looking, a town that has learned by the evidence of what it almost missed that invisible does not mean absent, that quiet does not mean okay, that the woman counting pennies at the counter might be counting the last of everything she has, and the only thing standing between her and 3 more months alone is whether anyone in the room decides to put down their coffee and see her. Evelyn Parker was seen on a Tuesday in February in a cold bakery by a man who had no reason to look and looked anyway. She spent the rest of her life making sure the looking never stopped.